You're live.
What's going on, everyone? I'm Chris Baker.
And I'm Ty Backer.
Welcome to episode 190 of Behind the ToolBelt with TC Backer Construction.
TC Backer. Roofing, siding, windows, gutters, solar. Roofing, siding, windows, gutters, solar. TC Backer, TC Backer.
Behind the ToolBelt is sponsored by Lead Scout. Find out more at leadscoutapp.com.
I just think our salespeople are being a little bit of, well, lead babies.
Yeah, we don't say lead babies. It's okay for people to specialize in selling instead of canvassing and lead gen for themselves. We call them roofing sales professionals.
Surprisingly, sales are way up as we built heavier duty lead gen systems and let our salespeople be roofing sales professionals.
Better leads. TC Backer, TC Backer.
Boom. TC Backer family. Can you hear me?
What up?
There we go.
Yep.
TC
We hear
Backer
you, man.
family. How's
What's
everyone
happening,
doing?
Chris?
Episode
Good.
190. Episode 190.
Yes, sir.
Sorry, I
190.
had some technical difficulties with my headphones here while we were on that little commercial break.
Gotcha. You got to keep them on your head.
Yeah,
how
I
they
know,
work.
right? Well, I couldn't because it like exploded my eardrums when that, for some reason, that commercial was actually extremely loud in my head, in my headphones.
I felt the same pain.
Did you?
Yeah, but I'm deaf in the one ear, so it didn't really bother me. I'm trying to go deaf in the other one, obviously.
Yeah,
This
well, I
is
think I'm matching you at this point in time. My ears are ringing right now.
I see that. You're kind of like,
Did you guys see me throw my headphones off?
Man, the baby didn't even scream, so I don't know why it didn't sound any different to me.
good. That's good. We're
Yeah,
glad.
so-
We're glad. Yeah. So Tony Whatley, my man, how's it going, brother?
Good stuff, man. Thank you guys for having me on the show. I'm looking forward to having some time with you guys.
Yeah, me
Yeah.
too, Tony. So Tony's just to get the cat out of the bag here a little bit and strangle it. Tony has been is my first business coach. Not that I haven't had mentors and things like that along the years, but to actually be super intentional and ask somebody for help for once in my life about 8 weeks ago.
Yeah.
We decided this would be a good fit for both of us. And I'm super proud to say that Tony is my business coach today, or life coach, or whatever coach I need him to be, because it seems like he kind of fits all of those molds and hasn't steered me in the wrong direction yet, and has given me deep direction, decisive, decision making, and just a wealth, a hydrant of knowledge. And Tony, I appreciate that, and so is everybody else, whether they know it or not, because you've been a good dude, good influence in my life, and I look forward to our growing relationship in the near future here, brother.
Hey, man, feelings mutual, man. I really enjoy our conversations. I look forward to those things. And, one thing that most people don't understand about business coaches is that the good ones, we don't really just talk about P&Ls and balance sheets and, strategies and systems and processes. We can get into all that stuff, but I've found that really in the last 5 years, when I've been doing this more public with a lot of different business owners, a lot of the conversations are just conversations you wouldn't have with your best friend or your spouse, or things you want to bounce off of each other and kind of get strategies and answers on. And I would say that 70% of the conversations kind of circle around your life and what are the biggest challenges or fears that you may have, and kind of looking at things objectively, removing emotion, and kind of making the best decisions. So, it's a business coach, life coach. I guess that's a good bundle, but it all comes in the same package.
Right on, right on. And the thing that I like about that, about you, especially, and Vic and I talked about this shortly after we got off our call Thursday, because Vic was in the truck with me. Like you have this cool demeanor about you, and I'm kind of high strung and more of like on the Ed Milet, when I get people fired up, like let's go. And why I say that you compliment me well is because you're cool hand Luke. You don't get very excited. You can tell when you're happy. You're not dry whatsoever. You just got this really cool demeanor about you that I feel like helps calm my soul down at times when I speak to you, because your voice is almost soothing. Not to sound gay or anything like that, but it's like you soothe me, like when I talk to you, because you got the answers. If I say something and your outside perspective and your point of view is so profound, but yet so simple, because I'm in it all day, and you're kind of like at that 10,000 foot view where I want to be, and help guide me so far. I mean, more than you actually know. And I'm sure you probably get that. And it's probably one of those things too, where you probably, and I hope so, you get just as much out of it as I do at times, maybe not as much as I do at this point in time. And I think we've navigated through getting to know each other fairly quickly. With both of us being on social media, and this is what you see is what you get right here. I'm not a different person here that I am on our calls, or if you were sitting in the studio with us right now. We actually have a live audience studio tonight. We have a couple people in the studio, at least down here in Greenville tonight, watching us. I got my other co-leader, groupies, Ken Yance, who's a beast, and I can't wait till you get.
Hopefully they're not flashing you and doing all that, man, because it gets really distracting during a podcast.
Yeah. So Heath, no, just kidding.
190 episodes in, Tony. We're pretty good with the distractions. you get to be good at paying attention and dealing with the distractions behind the scenes, man.
There you go, man. It's all mental skills. It's all focus driven, right?
Yeah, it's a muscle that you got to train, I guess.
That's it.
I'm curious to know how you got into this, Tony. Like how did you start your career? Like what did you enter the working force doing? Maybe talk about that a little bit, and at what point did you decide that business coaching, or like teaching other people about business, or just being that person to lean on for successful people? Like how did you figure out that was your niche?
Man, given the means, here's how most people turn out. When we have the means and the resources available later in our lives, we usually become a hero of our younger self. So at some point in your life, whether that was last year or when your childhood or your formative years or whatever, when you have the time and the means and the resources, eventually you will become the hero of some younger version of yourself. And I grew up really humble roots, small town. Parents blue collar, just like I started out. My mom was a cafeteria worker in the public school systems her whole career. And my dad was a U.S. Marine, Vietnam vet. And after that, he worked in the chemical refineries here in Houston his entire career until he retired. So I learned the value of hard work and understanding that if I wanted to get something, I was going to have to go figure that out for myself. Nobody in my entire family on both sides had ever gone to college. No one ever crossed the 6-figure mark. I mean, we were pretty poor, and I didn't realize that a lot of these things until later on when you start looking back and you realize, like, man, the boxes I used to store my Hot Wheels in were government cheese boxes and stuff like that. And you realize, like, oh crap, like we had a lot of handouts back then, and I didn't understand all this stuff. You kind of grow up in that way. You don't really realize what else is out there. And so I kind of got it in my mind that I wanted to go somehow make 6 figures. Like that was an initial goal. I mean, guys, this is 1980s. That was a big money thing back then, right? And so everybody tells you to go be a doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer. And I was like, well, I had to put myself through school. So let me figure this out. And I'm a car guy. I love building and racing cars. So I said, okay, there must be something to do with engineering, because I'm not interested in the medical space or being a lawyer. So maybe that's what I do. And at the time I was working in chemical refineries. I was a welder, a pipe fitter, did insulation work. And it took me 8 years to go through school because I was going to school at nighttime, putting myself through, sleeping about 3 hours a night for the period of time. And I graduated as a mechanical engineer. I was in my late 20s at that point, got into the oil industry, working in projects. That scaled out for 20 years when I was working on these massive projects. At the end of my career, I was working on hundreds of millions of dollars of projects and international teams, and I was writing purchase orders for 20-30 million dollars on some situations. So I got really good at desensitizing myself for money and understanding that I had to make the right decisions based on data, history, gut feel, all your risk mitigations. And I understood that, these limiting beliefs that I had growing up broke, which translated into small business, made small business very easy for me. So if that busy career wasn't enough, I started building automotive businesses. And along the way, I launched ls1tech.com, which became the largest General Motors performance community on the internet. And still to this day, we were sold that to a private equity company for a few million. And it was something I just built in my spare time. And it was never intended to make millions of dollars. It was just something I enjoyed, my passion of cars. I'm a leader type personality. I wanted to have a cool place on the internet for guys to talk about cars and racing cars and getting faster, becoming a better driver, having a cooler looking car. And, Corvettes, Camaros, Firebirds, and all the LS engine trucks were kind of the main thing back then. And we built the #1 site. And that built off a series of spin-off sites and different verticals. And I created performancetrucks.net. There's a racing truck site for all the guys that wanted to modify their trucks to race them. That one, both these sites together grew to about 500,000 registered members. We had over 150 advertising accounts. I had a website development team. I had a marketing and creative agency to build these ads for these companies that wanted to advertise. We did racing events around the country. And at that time, I was pursuing an executive path in oil and gas. And I said, man, I made pretty good money on these car things. So that's why we sold the company. And, I have no regrets for that, because anytime you exit a company, it's a pretty big step on your financial, lifestyle. And I use that money to build other companies and invest in other companies since then. So over the course of time, people kept telling me, you should be teaching people this kind of stuff, because I'd helped 7 of my former employees build multi-million-dollar companies. One of those became a 9-figure company. He sold it for over 100 million just a year and a half ago. So I've been mentoring these people privately in the background, but I never wanted to put myself out there. I never wanted to get on camera. I never wanted to stand on stages or have a podcast. But everybody kept telling me, you should be doing this. And eventually I just really had to call out my own bullshit, because what it was doing is I would say, like, oh, I got a family, I got a career, I've got businesses I'm running, I don't have time to do that. But really I was just being a chicken shit, and I was hiding from the camera and not putting myself out there because insecurities and childhood bullies and all these different things that I just didn't need to do that. I was good at being the MVP and the hiding behind the logos of the companies and such. So, 2015, I had a car accident racing cars, and I realized that I could have died in that moment, and then all of that would have been gone. And so I started going on this mission and really calling out all the bullshit that I had in my lives, whether that was people that were around me or the hiding from the camera or not improving myself to be able to carry the story that I have. So that's the journey I've been on since 2015.
Wow.
Just getting more out in the camera.
Yeah, dude, that's I love the story. I mean, going back to the beginning of how you got started, and I feel like it was probably more like a side hustle there for a minute. And then it turned into much more. What now? I got 2 questions for you. I guess I'm going to start with this one, Tony. Have you, with mentoring people and through all of your journey, who or what has been, who's been your mentors, who's been your coach to help navigate you through all of these transactions, these acquisitions, and how to, I guess, manage that type of money?
That's a great question.
I had a lot of different mentors, I would say, or indirect mentors as well through my corporate career. I mean, when I started out managing projects, I was managing $1 million projects, and I thought that was a lot of money. And I remember just being nervous and just kind of just focusing too much on the money, because it was something I just didn't have in my life. And you kind of get numb to that after you work a certain amount of years, and you start to rely on the data and the history and evidence and realizations and discoveries and calculations. And you start to realize that I'm still being highly compensated. I still got to make the right decisions. Just like business owners nowadays, if you're a CEO of a company, your sole duty is to ensure the growth and survival of your business. And sometimes that hurts feelings, and sometimes that's an emotional thing. But if you're not really doing things to grow your company or ensuring the survival of your company, and you're making bad decisions or wasting money on this and doing these kind of things that aren't going to really help grow the company, you're not really a good CEO. So you have to learn to remove the emotion from making business decisions. I know that sounds really cold, but there's a reason the Fortune 500 companies operate the way they do. And it's because their CEOs are really in tune to understand, hey, if we have to do layoffs because we're on a down season, we got to do that. And I know that sounds like, oh, we shouldn't do that to people. And I get that, but I've been on both sides of that. I've been on the side that's been laid off many times in the oil industry, and the ones that had to do the massive layoffs on the oil industry. And guys, it's a tougher decision, but successful companies are the way they are because of how they operate. And, so to me, just being able to use the trainings and the different things I had in the corporate space, when you go on an executive path, they're investing hundreds of thousands of dollars into your training. So leadership, communication, strategy, skills, process, organizational development, HR, like all these different laws and things that were in a highly regulated industry, kind of condensed down to help me really focus on small business, which again, it makes me think small business is a lot easier. And that's one of the reasons I was able to build and play things on the side to start these different companies on my own.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Who was your biggest influence over the years?
I would say that I had my dad was really the leadership type personality. I mean, he was always the leader of his friend circles. He worked out, he started out as a pipe fitter himself, worked into a plant supervisor at the end of his career, and never went to school. And, when I saw him interacting with people in his, his maintenance crews, really is like he had these large maintenance crews. They're doing shutdowns and things like that. So some of these were hundreds of people. And, I got to meet some of these people at social gatherings, and sometimes I'd go to the job site and visit him. I saw how he interacted, and, he was just very a humble leader. He was not the bossy type and the yelling type. And, I got that at the home. I got the drill sergeant, dad, but at work, he was like a lot more empathetic and actually read people. And he kind of understood who the people were that were the key leaders. And he also understood like what are the individual motivators that each of his people on his team had, because most inexperienced managers think that, hey, if I just throw money at the problem, the money fixes the problem. But you and I both know that sometimes the motivators are not money. Some people just like to be recognized and acknowledged. Some people will like to have more responsibilities. Some people do want the money. Some people want to work less hours because they want to spend more time with their family. So they have these different motivators. Mm-hmm. And as leaders, it's our duty to understand what are the individual motivators for the guys that are reporting directly to us. Right. And so I had different CEOs, and I had some bad ones and good ones, but I think that even when you have a terrible boss, there's things you can learn from them, because they do some things very well, but they also do a lot of things that you wouldn't agree with and you wouldn't want to take into your own leadership style. So, through that corporate journey for 20 years, I had a lot of mentors in different supervisory type levels, and they invested a lot of their personal time into me and understanding that. But, in the business space and the entrepreneurship space, when I started building out this business model and podcasting and speaking, one of the earliest paid groups I joined was Lewis Howes, and he's got a top rated podcast called School of Greatness. And, the guy makes millions of dollars from his podcast. I said, dude, I'm just going to hire that guy because he's already got some of these things figured out. It's a completely different business model. And so hired him. I'm still in his group. I go to his events. I'll be in Columbus in actually a few weeks to attend his event every year. And then after that, I joined the Arate Syndicate and had Ed Milet and Andy Frizella as mentors as well. And, that whole dynamic has kind of shifted with the Arate Syndicate. When we first started it, there was a high level group, and then there was like a larger group that had like thousands of people. The high level group, we had to apply, and they took 100 people and they handpicked the people they wanted to mentor. And we met up every quarter, and we had this 3-day event and got to really ask those guys a lot of questions. They brought some of their own network and speakers in, and we had really an intimate bonding with all these different people that are in that group. Because I think the small format groups are way more value potential than these 10,000 person type events.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like I liked how you touched on something, learning how to navigate your people. I just had a conversation with somebody today. Let's just say 10 years ago, you had 2 generations that most managers or leaders were dealing with back then. It would have been baby boomers and Gen Xers, right? But today it's a little bit different. The dynamic's a little bit different. You're dealing with Gen Xers, millennials, and Gen Zs, right? And they all have different motivators, right? Like the Gen Xers are all about, work hard, work late, get up early, bust your ass, get up, wipe the dirt off, you'll be fine, right? Right, kind of mentality. And the millennials, it's not necessarily about the money for them. It's more of like a stimulation of doing tasks and completing, small projects and things like that. Just like not doing the same thing over and over and over and over again. So you got to continuously keep challenging them. And then the Gen Zers are very data driven, right? Like they know where to find it, because what did they have? Their experience was COVID.
Yeah.
Right. They experienced isolation. They experienced face masks. They experienced, I'm going to Google it, I'm going to figure it out. Chat GBT, all of those things. So I feel like if you're stuck in that's the way that we've always done it mode, that kind of leadership isn't gonna fly with that different dynamic of three different generations within your organization. So you got to figure out and get on their level. Like, you can't continuously try to drive people up to your level. You literally have to get where they're at, figure out what motivates them. And some people, they're just totally money driven.
Mhm.
And if that's the case, they may not be a good fit for your culture, right? Because it's not always about the money. The money is just a tip at the end of the week. If you're coming in for your team and you're working together, and synchronized cohesively, moving in the right, the same direction and completing the task at hand, and that you're so good at your job that your coworker standing next to you has a job, and vice versa. If you can get that dynamic, that flow, and everybody going in the same direction, and then you have this, like, and with a lot of salespeople, obviously a lot of salespeople are money driven people, but they don't have to be. That's just the way that it used to always get done, right? Money incentivized, a salesperson. But if you can get them early and start honing them in that, because you're selling these jobs, the person answering the phone and taking the calls has a job today because you continuously close these jobs. And because you continuously close these jobs, our production side out in the field has a job. And because they're so good at their jobs, you're getting referrals. It's this harmonious rotation of, and if you can paint that picture in everybody's eyes, like, this isn't about me, this is all about we. This is so much more than just a paycheck. You know what I mean? That's the tip at the end of the week, because I'm so goddamn good at my job. You have a job, and thank you for being so good at your job, because I have a place to come to every day, that the door is open and the lights are on, because we're all so goddamn good at our jobs.
Yeah.
Do you guys think it's possible to change somebody's motivating factors and what drives them? Or do you think that's just something that's instilled, maybe as a young adult, child, with life experience or something like that? Do you think that's a changeable thing?
I can't speak for other people, but I would say that my motivators have definitely changed. And if we want to align that with purpose, I think that every 10 years or so, my purpose has shifted. And I'll give you an example. So think about when we were a teenager, your purpose was to hook up with girls and be popular and fit in and kind of be with the right crowd. Like, that's how we kind of figure out our social skills. Your 20s, you're really focused on getting more education or skills. You're trying how to be, I'm speaking from a man's perspective, that I need to go learn how to do some skills or get some education to be able to make more money, because I want to be able to provide for my family, maybe touch a little bit of success. So we're really focused on gathering information in our 20s. 30s is when you usually have some skills and education behind your belt. And then you're kind of in this production mode. You're like, dude, I'm just going to go stack money. I'm just going to go, trade my physicality and trade my time. And I'm going to just work my ass off. And I'm just going to work all these overtime hours and be willing to go offshore for 30 days at a time, and whatever your career is. And really, you do a lot of sacrificing just to stack money, and you miss out on a lot of opportunities with your family and all these kind of things. But you try to justify it as like, this is what men do, because we watched men before us do the same thing. Now, 40s is when it got really interesting. So 40s to me became more of a self-awareness decade, when you start looking back retrospectively, because you're being told that you're middle-aged now, and you go, well, shit, let me do some assessments and look back and see what I could have done better. Like, what were the mistakes I had? What are the things I could have improved? And then also you're looking in the mirror at that time, and most men are not really in physical shape, and we still feel like we're in our 20s. We still think that we're athletes. We still remember all the things that we could do in our 20s. And you look in the mirror and you're not seeing what you think, right? You think this, but you're looking at that and you're like, what the hell's going on? And then you surround yourself with a bunch of people that validate your excuses. And it's like, oh yeah, I don't work and I don't exercise because, we're not getting any younger. And I got this football injury from high school, and like all those excuses. And you kind of throw them back and forth like a tennis match. And at some point, hopefully you gain the awareness. You go like, this is some bullshit. Like this is just a bunch of bullshit. And so you kind of go on the self-awareness journey and trying to figure out, like, how do I improve myself? How do I get to that next level? What does that even mean? And you start to realize that your purpose is more pursuit of fulfillment and impact. I want to create a legacy. I want to create some fulfillment. I actually want to enjoy my life and not make so many sacrifices for the sake of money. Because I'll tell you guys, most of you are probably making six figures or more, especially if you're in the roofing industry. And once you cross that 120 mark, 10,000 a month, if you're not living in some crazy area like LA or New York City, you cross $10,000 a month, you can actually have a pretty good lifestyle. Then once you get into the 200 range and the 300 range a year, you're not really changing your lifestyle a whole much. You might have a little bit nicer truck. You might have a little bit bigger home. You might so you're not having these drastic changes until you start making at least $500,000 a year. But then, are you trading a lot of time? Are you trading a lot of anxiety and stress and regret to be able to create that? And if the answer is yes, then is it really worth it? And I think when you're in your 40s, especially in your 50s, I'm 50 now, you're going to start to realize, like, dude, all that money isn't worth it if I have to trade my peace of mind, my time freedom, my location freedom, or my financial freedom to do it.
Yeah, that's a great point, man. That's a great point. Ken brought up a good one too, man. In the comments here. He says that he doesn't think that anyone else can change your motivation, but I think with natural evolution of a man, it will change on its own. And I definitely agree with that. But I also think that if you have somebody, let's just put, for example, Ty, you kind of brought in this whole, we're going to do stuff for the community, and we're going to try to make impact on people's lives. I think it is 100% possible to have somebody with that kind of mentality influence another person that's underneath them as a leader, to say, you know what, like, yeah, I come here for a paycheck, but now I feel like I have a more of a purpose. You know what I mean? It's not showing up just for a paycheck anymore. So I do think that with the right influence and the right leadership and the right people around you, you can have that. I don't want to say maybe, they made you change, but they definitely had a little bit of an influence in it, right? If you're in the right environment.
Yeah, no, and that's a great point, because we've watched this happen to the hardest heads of people, has changed. And see, this is where I think people get this twisted, is it's attraction rather than promotion, right? If everyone over here is succeeding, right, and they're standing over there, at some point in time, they're going to get curious. They're gonna be like, what are you doing over there? What's different? Why do they look so happy? Because it's like this happy train is going by, the successful train is going by, and I'm standing outside the tracks looking inside the windows, and it's like everybody's inside there all happy, giddy, joyous, and free, and all that good shit. And it's like I'm standing out here wondering why I'm so miserable, right? Because it's never going to be a good idea until I think it's a good idea to jump on that happy, successful train. Right. But that's why if you continuously try to jam something down somebody's throat, you're just going to eventually at some point in time push them away, or elevate them. Right. But then it also goes back to, like, you got to coach, and Ken's a big influencer and student of coaching. You got to find how an individual needs to be coached. Not everybody's coached, the same exact way either. Most times, though, it's attraction rather than promotion. Right. Because I know, especially me as a kid, if my father was screaming and hollering at me and trying to make a point, it was pushing me away.
Yeah.
Right. Like I was grudgingly, doing what he wanted me to I was doing what he wanted me to do. But I didn't want to. I didn't think it was a good idea yet. Right. So that's why I feel like attraction rather than promotion, because we've watched it. I've watched it over 2 decades. I've watched where I've pushed people away because of poor leadership, poor management, trying to drive things down people's throat and being just more annoying than any fucking thing and being made fun of behind my back. Right. And then I went to the other extreme as well, where I became, walked on, used, manipulated, and all of those things. And then I kind of started to develop, these people skills where I was able to actually start reading people better. Reading, am I being taken advantage of, or when to draw the line in the sand and stop wasting my time and energy on an individual or a group of people or organization, that they're not going to get it, because like I said, it's not going to be a good idea until they think it's a good idea. So it's like, you got to learn when to draw that line in the sand, because let's face it, we all only have so much bandwidth. We all only have so much energy. And like, when do you kick them to the curb? Like, when is enough? When am I done? Because at a certain point in time, you become taken advantage of, or everyone else is watching, right? Because when you're in some type of leadership position, all eyes are on you at all times, watching to see how you react to this other individual's behavior. Now that becomes the standard. Right? You got to be careful with that too, right? Because that's what becomes the norm. That's what becomes the standard, because they see that's what you tolerate. You know what I mean? And that's where accountability comes into play. And everybody takes accountability as a negative word, but accountability in my eyes and in our organization, that means success. Or, accountability means success. So, Tony, you brought up a bunch of good stuff. I'm going to circle back to getting in front of the camera. And something Chris and I talked or heard a while back. It was one of our first or second guest on the show. Deshaun Bryant talked about, are you being humble or are you hiding? Right. And I know even still today, I struggle with, am I being humble or am I hiding? Right. And where the light bulb went off for me, it was when we got some kind of award. I think it was, I don't know, something that we did in the community or something. I can't remember what it was. And I got the award. What was it?
It was, we were recognized when we did the roof for the Crispus Attucks building. And they had it was like an African-American, convention, or not, I don't want to say convention, but it was like an awards thing where they recognize people in Lancaster City that did things. I think they did it on MLK Day, I believe.
Yeah, right.
And we were recognized in there for our contributions to the community. I don't remember what the award was called, but it is a female's name, I believe. And that was the award. I remember the time. I remember exactly what you were talking about.
Right. So a light bulb went off. I got the award and I felt some kind of way because we didn't do it for the award. So I felt some kind of way because we received the award. Like, it was no big deal. Our coworkers didn't even know we were doing this for charity. It was just a normal day. We were going out, we were tearing a roof off, we were putting a new roof on, we were doing gutters. And again, the entire time I'm thinking we're being humble. Right. And then next thing I know, I get a phone call. They're like, hey, you guys got an award. We need you to come to this big ass banquet where there was like 3,000 people. I was asked to come up on stage, receive this award. And not that I was embarrassed, or maybe at that time I felt like I wasn't worthy or whatever the case was. So we received this award and we got home, and I kind of just like put it in my office, and that's where it stayed. And I was laying in bed one night and I thought to myself, you selfish, self-centered fucking piece of shit. You are so goddamn selfish to not allow your team to celebrate this win. Here, and the whole entire time I thought, I'm being this humble guru or whatever, like, we don't do this for the notoriety. Well, it's okay that people recognize the things that you do in the community, but just know that we're not doing it for that. Right. But who am I to say that our team cannot celebrate a win, this victory, this award that we received by the city of Lancaster City in Pennsylvania. Like, the entire city was there. I mean, we're talking police commissioners, we're talking governors, we're talking mayors, we're talking like the people with the biggest pockets in the area were there to watch us receive this award. And it's like, here, I don't even think I took a picture of us there. You know what I mean?
We did.
I'm being humble. I'm hiding. I was hiding is what I was doing. I was hiding. And I don't know if it's fear of success. I don't know, but I just felt like at that moment that I was being really selfish to my team. So that was a light bulb moment for me.
Yeah. That's a good awareness moment. I mean, to me, I I really didn't have comfort being in front of the camera. I just, we all think we have an accent no matter where we're from. We're like, I don't even like the way I sound on recordings. And that's the other thing. When you go through public speaking training, I did Toastmasters for a couple of years and I hired speaking coaches. And the voice that you hear on the recording is actually the voice that everybody hears. We hear our own voices a little bit deeper, a little bit different because the voice is resonating inside our chest and it's echoing inside our skull. So we hear a different version of our voice to ourselves. But the voice that you hear on your recording is what everybody hears every day when you're speaking. So you can't really be embarrassed by that. That's how you sound. And if you want to improve your enunciation and remove your accents and become more dynamic in your range, like hire a speaking coach, join Toastmasters. That's how you gain the awareness. Because if you would have interviewed me 2015, I would have been the old version of myself. I call that version of myself Mono Tony. Mono Tony speaks in dude speak. Dude speak is same volume, same pitch. Hey, thank you for having me on the show. Really glad to be here. This is some cool stuff. This is what I've achieved. Like that's dude speak. Like most guys speak like that, and they don't have the awareness that we could speak with different ranges, different cadence, different speeds, different volume control. Like these are all things that we use to speak influentially. So if you're on video or podcast or stage, learning how to control your voice to be able to speak influentially is going to benefit not only your personal life, but your business, your sales closings, and also help you build more content. So I think that anyone who's never been formally trained in public speaking, a lot of people have a big ego, like, well, I've made millions of dollars. I don't need public speaking skills. I have the occasional courage to stand in front of my team and give kickoff meetings and project safety meetings. And that's public speaking, right? I'm standing in front of dozens or hundreds of people. And I used to say that same bullshit because I did do that. My company had 75 employees. I built project teams with over 100 employees, and I was the guy that had to do those events. But here's the thing that you can't really understand is that when you're speaking in front of a captive audience, which is your employee or your project team, they're a captive audience. They're not there by choice, right? You're the boss, you're the supervisor. They kind of have to be there. But if you're a public speaker or you're creating content on social media, those people can just get the fuck up or scroll past it and keep going about their business. And one of the worst situations you'll have is when you have these highly successful, egotistical guys that kind of get on a stage at one of these events like you and I attend, and they suck at what they're doing. Even if they've accomplished amazing things on paper, they're just not good at their skills. You see people start looking at their phones, or even worse, they get up and they go take a piss break. So we actually call those the piss break speakers.
Right on. Ken thinks he's a great public speaker. What is it? Oh, with Miss South Carolina was. Oh, no. So, Tony, what do you think it takes? I'm gonna circle back to a couple more questions here. What do you think it takes to be a great entrepreneur? What are some skill sets or whatever thing? What does it take besides grit?
Man, I think the most valuable skill that you need to have as an entrepreneur is the willingness to look forward to the results. Like you need to have the results, and you don't really have to care about how you feel. Too many people don't want, they say they want the results, but then they get their emotions in the way, right? And I'm not a psychopath or anything like that. I just understand that I want the results and I'm willing to go do the work. Like think about this. I go to the gym 7 days a week. I don't want to go to the gym half the time. I really don't. I don't want to eat healthy, but I understand that I want that result. So I'm just going to go whether I like it or not. So I had to fool myself. I had to go, hey, I've been working out since I was 14. Have I ever left the gym a single time in my life having regretted being there? And the answer is no. I've never regretted leaving the gym. So even if I don't give a shit about wanting to go there, I understand that when I leave, I'll never regret going. So I kind of put myself in that future version of myself and I trick myself into going, but that's what I do. I understand that there's a result on the back end of that workout. So you think about work when you got to do the follow-ups and the calls and building your systems and making the hard sales and making tough decisions. You don't have to want to feel like that. You don't need motivation. You just got to be results driven. And I think that's the differentiator from even successful employees versus successful, employees, like at every level. It's just, you got to be willing to execute regardless of your emotions.
Right on. Good answer. Good response. What do you think the most common challenges are for most entrepreneurs or business owners face today?
Man, I think that most people show up to the party with very small dreams and they have very strong limiting beliefs because that's how we're raised. If you think about this, most of our formative years are between 8 and 15, that kind of time frame. So if your parents struggled with money, or even worse, if you had parents that kind of looked at successful people and they're the must be nice people. Oh, must be nice for that rich asshole to have that Lamborghini. Must be nice to have that big house. Must be nice to have that boat. Like if you grew up with people like that in your proximity, or you hang out with people like that, what's going to do is it's going to create this upper limit on what you believe is potential for you. And also the fear of success is a real thing. You start to understand that, hey, if my parents or the people I love or my best friends talk shit about people who are successful, if I become successful, they might talk shit about me. And you have that in your subconscious. So people will start to self-sabotage themselves to kind of get back to a comfortable level because they don't want to look like there's a successful person that's been vilified their entire lives. And then you start thinking about, being around people who are like, oh, I'll never be a millionaire. Or, like you say shit like that when you go, I'll never be a millionaire, but I'll do this. I'll never be rich, but I'll do this. But if you tell yourself that, you will never be a millionaire. You will never be rich, because as soon as you start programming your brain that you have this upper limit, you're going to keep that in your subconscious. And so what's going to happen is when you don't set these goals, your brain's going to shut off. It's just going to turn off like, oh, you got no goals for me. We're already at our peak potential right now. That's it. Cool. Turns the brain off. So you got to understand that your brain is like a supercomputer and it's always scanning the horizon and looking for different opportunities. And if you have goals set that, hey, I would like to make $1 million a year, it's always going to be looking. Your reticular activating system. You probably heard Ed Milet talk about this. I'll get into the details if you want to talk about that. But if you're always scanning the horizon for opportunities because you have set goals, your brain is always going to go, hey, there it is. That's the opportunity. Like, that's the path we need to go. That's the person you need to talk to. That's the deal we need to go close. That's going to get us closer to that goal. So you're always got your brain switched on when you have these goals. Mm-hmm. So reticular activating system, that sounds really fancy, RAS, right? Mm-hmm. What is that? Everybody here has experienced that. And if you need an example of that, it's when, think about something that you wanted to buy. Like, and you didn't own it yet, but you wanted to buy it. And you're kind of thinking about it. Maybe it's a new truck. Maybe you wanted an F-350 and it's bright red. Yeah, man, I'd love to have an F-350 dually, bright red, TC Backer colors. And white. As soon as you start thinking about that specific vehicle and in that specific color, what happens? You're driving down the freeway and you see that red dually drive the other way, and you see one in the parking lot. And your brain starts to look for all these little examples of the things that you've set a goal for. And before it seemed like they were all invisible. You never even noticed those kind of things until you started putting in your mind that that's something I would like to achieve or own in my life. And suddenly you see them everywhere. You're like, man, everybody's got these things. Like, that's your reticular activating system. That's your brain and your subconscious. The power of that with focus on the goals that you set for yourself. So if you know you can control that, you start to make a game out of this. You start to realize that, hey, if I just set some goals, my brain's going to be working in the background, looking for those opportunities to connect the dots. So I need to quit hanging around these people that tell me like, oh man, that's really hard. I don't think you should try that. That's risky, because everybody gives you their experience and their advice based on their own level of risk tolerance and their own level of fears and their own level of lack of experience. Everybody loves to give you 2 cents, but I always tell people if they're giving you their 2 cents and they haven't done what you want to achieve, you should give them a refund.
Yeah,
man,
that's a great point.
Yeah, man,
that's a great point.
See, Tony, this is why I love you, man. Because you always have the right thing to say, and you can get super deep on it, and the way that you articulate it, it's very understandable, man. I love that. So what strategies or techniques do you use to help business owners develop effective leadership skills?
Man, I think the most important leadership skill is just having empathy and communication skills, right? We have different styles of leadership, but they all require understanding people and the psychology of people and what drives and motivates people. Now, here's an interesting survey. You can go look these things up. But if you go look at the Fortune 500 companies and you look at the profiles of the Fortune 500 CEOs, they did some studies. Different colleges have done this. And they looked at the IQ, which is your intelligence quotient, or your EQ, which is your emotional quotient. And if you didn't look at the study, you would think like most of those CEOs of the biggest, most successful companies should probably be really high on the intelligence level. That should probably be their predominant driving force. But it's actually the opposite. About 80% of them measured higher on EQ, your emotional quotient, which is your ability to communicate and interact and have empathy and read people. So also think about this when you're thinking about different supervisors or managers that you're looking to promote. What is their empathy level? Can they read people? Can they influence people? Can they lead people? Maybe they're the right person, but if you have somebody that's a star performer at a technical role, maybe they're not going to be the best manager. We've seen this mistake. We call that the Peter principle, right? We promote people to their level of incompetence and they kind of peter out. Just kind of a joke we talk about, but it's true. And I've seen this too many times in different companies. And, people think like, oh, I got the sales, this guy's kicking ass on sales. He's the best sales closer we have. We should make him sales manager. But then you realize that he never wanted to manage people. He never had the empathy or the care about worrying about people. He was a closer and he was really good at what he did and he enjoyed what he's doing. But the thing is most people will take that promotion that you offer because they want the title, they want the status, they want the paycheck, all the wrong reasons, right? They should be wanting to be a leader. And the paycheck is the result that they create. But so many people don't want to piss the boss off. They don't want to let you down if they like you. If you're giving them a promotion, they think, oh, maybe he believes in me. I should do this. And then, 6 months down the road, they're out the door because they're just not a performer anymore. So be a better communicator. I mean, the best book I would recommend for everybody here, I think this should be everybody's reading, is How to Win Friends and Influence Other People. Go buy that book, make your wife read it, make your kids read it. That should be mandatory reading for everybody. And it's an older book. I think it was written in the 1950s by Carnegie. But it will literally tell you how to become a better podcast host, how to become a better friend, how to be a better husband or wife. All these things are communication skills, and it really has to do with listening more, asking the right questions, and being interested in other people instead of just always just talking about yourself. Like, how can I serve you? How can I help you? What are you working on? And if you can do those kind of things, you're going to influence people a lot more than just bossing them around and pointing your finger.
So good. So good. So good.
Yeah,
So
that's good stuff.
how do you assess the unique needs and goals of your team? How do you assess that?
I just ask them. I have individual conversations with them and try to build some rapport and kind of get an understanding what they are, what they want to achieve. And the other thing I think about from leadership perspective is that people pass in and out of your organization. And while they're in your proximity and you're a supervisor, you should be focusing on being a steward of their life. Like, you're not trying to make them to become the best roofer. You want them to become the best human. Like, you want to see their full potential and realize that, man, they may become the best roofer, but they also may graduate from that at some point and want to go do something else. Maybe they become a business owner, but while they're under my supervision, it's my duty as a leader to invest into them to become a better human. I want their core values to become stronger. I want them to become making better decisions on the financial level, family level, all these things. So your leadership, it goes outside the job site. A lot of times people focus too much on the job and the metrics and the KPIs, and we got to do this, and they don't really care to ask. But you may have that guy that was just like me working as a welder out there, and people are like, hey, what do you want to do later on? Do you want to do this for the rest of your life? It's like, no, man, I'm going to be a project manager. I want to start companies. I want to do these different things. And as soon as I started vocalizing those responses to certain people, they would make opportunities for me to be able to use those skills. Like, oh man, yeah, you're welding pipe and you're welding some structural steel here, but you're good at numbers. Like, you like math. You want to be an engineer? I was like, yeah, I'm really good at math. And so I started doing material takeoffs and measurements, and I got into doing drafting and drawings, and they were teaching me all kinds of stuff that I could use those skills. So, have those one-on-one conversations with each one of your team members. Understand what are the things that drive them. If it's family, then they probably want to work less. They don't want to be the one that's having to feel guilty about taking on extra overtime every week. Maybe that's how you keep that talent, right? You may have some people that, dude, I just want to stack cash and work as much as I can. Hey, dude, give them the hours. Like, give them those jobs. Like, take the ones from the other guy that doesn't want to do it and give it to that guy, and that's fine. Like, they're both happy now, right? And so you have some people that want to be leaders. I always think about leadership is that people will let you know when they're interested in becoming a leader. And one of the hardest questions that I would ask when people come in, because they just want the title, they want the bigger office or whatever, they would come in and go, hey man, how can I be the manager? How can I become project manager? How can I be this? I said, oh, that's a leadership role. Tell me about yourself. What have you done to invest in your leadership skills? Have you taken, joined a Toastmasters and learned some communication and leadership skills there? Have you read any good leadership books lately? Are you listening to leadership podcasts? And if they have answers that say no to those things, then they don't want to be a leader. They just want the paycheck and the title. They want the status. They're not real leaders, because people like me, I was studying leaders. I was consuming leadership content. I was volunteering to go take leadership trainings and things like that that the company was willing to pay for long before I became a leader. So if you're not investing in those skills, you're not reading the books and absorbing the content, you'll see that real leaders will raise their hand and start showing that they are capable and they're investing in themselves before they become a leader.
So good. So good. And
Yeah,
seeing
man,
that,
that's a great
you
point.
brought up a great point, and that's the thing about leadership. I think most people want it because of the title of being a leader, or they think what am I going to receive out of this? Right. Like, what am I going to get out of this? And really it starts with, and Heath and I had a little talk about this up on the rooftop chat today, where, it starts with humility and vulnerability. Right. It's not about what I'm going to get out of this. It's about serving others. Right. That's what it's about. Being in a leadership role is about serving others, not what I can get out of it. And knowing my strengths and knowing my weaknesses, values, and my beliefs. Right. So my belief today, and Tony, you talked about, being in your 40s and making certain amounts of money and things like that. But, where I'm at in my career, and I'm still in the prime of my career, is about impact. How many people can I influence? How many people can I impact? And Vic and I had a real deep conversation today. There were some things that I was kind of trying to process, and I couldn't quite digest it and fathom like what was going on. And by talking through it with Vic, it was an aha moment for me today. And it was me being able to be vulnerable with Vic. Vic is my right-hand man. Do I want to continuously think that Vic thinks that I know everything? No. Do I want to walk around and pretend that Chris thinks that I know everything? No. That's where the vulnerability comes in. And I think vulnerability is a huge key component to that, right? Like, I'm just human. I don't have all the answers, and that I'm smart enough to know that and I say this all the time, I'm smart enough to know that I need to surround myself around people that are smarter than me, right? In certain areas. What's funny about that, Chris? Because I say it all the time.
I was laughing off screen, bro. I wasn't even laughing at you whatsoever.
Gotcha. All right. You better not come over and smack the shit out of me. That's my leadership.
Bad timing.
Bad enough. Okay. But that's what it's about. It's like, what can I do to pour into people? And it's like, even though, and sometimes it's hard to encourage and embrace. I've come across situations where it's kind of like, I can't read the situation right, and I may react poorly to it. And what I'm doing is I'm actually pulling them down because of my behavior and the way that I responded to maybe a question that they had asked me. And I'm trying to get better at not looking at it like that, but looking at it from their point of view and not responding right away, and maybe just responding in a way that's like, okay, that's great. We'll take that into serious consideration, right? Because there are times that I need to be at 100%, right? And I'm identifying that actually better as time goes on, and the more that I've have become a student of leadership, right? Because that's what I am. I'm a student. I'm continuously trying to learn and sharpen my skills, because the last thing that I would ever want, and I might be all over the place here a little bit, but the last thing I would ever want is my team to actually outgrow me on certain levels. Right. And then it's okay that they do, because isn't that what we wanted? Right. When I decided at that moment to let go and not do everything myself, I had to encourage and I had to embrace and bring people in that are better at those things anyhow than I was, because at this point in time, I'm just kind of mediocre. And I kind of forget my point of where I was going with that, but going back to the vulnerability. Yeah, going back to the vulnerability part of it, it's like, I'm just human. I'm not bulletproof. I'm only human. I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to do stupid things, but it takes a real man to go back and apologize and admit those mistakes too when I do show my ass, because I've done that. We have the Ricky Bobby story. Some of you know the Ricky Bobby story.
Ricky Bobby.
Where when I chased Ricky Bobby down the street with a baseball bat. No, it wasn't a baseball bat. It gets better and better every time I share it.
I don't remember that part, but
we all have a Ricky Bobby story. You know what I mean? And especially, just scratch the surface and it'll veer its ugly head. Right. But what did we do? right? And some of us handled it poorly as well too. Yes, I acted poorly, but then it also brought out poor judgment and poor behaviors because of my behavior. And I had to be vulnerable. And Chris, you were one of them at that time, and I'm going to go ahead and share the story.
Yeah.
Chris responded poorly to it in my eyes, whether he agrees with this or not. Through some things that I heard, opposed to, and we had a discussion about this, and this was several years ago, where it was, Chris, like, if you would have, it's okay for you to call me out on my shit. You know what I mean? It was one of those moments, like, where it was like, dude, listen, you're in a position today, and I think we know each other well enough that if you need to come in here and slam the door and be like, yo, you acted poorly, that's okay, because sometimes I need to be held accountable as well. Right. And if you read, and you guys will, because we did the core values down here, when you read those core values, there's a whole lot of accountability in there, not just for you, but for me.
Right.
As well. And that doesn't mean public humiliation.
No.
Right. Because that's the worst thing. Nobody learns anything through embarrassment. And we talked about that a lot down here this week too. Nobody learns anything. Like, if you slip and fall on the ice, the last thing you do is figure out how it happened. You hurry up and scurry to your feet, and you look around to make sure that nobody saw you do it. You're not trying to correct the issue. You're not trying to pick something up or learn something while you're down there, right? You're trying to fucking get back up on your feet and run and hide your face because of embarrassment. There's no learning moment. There's no learning in that public humiliation, right? And then that's usually, it's us puffing our chests out, because we're insecure, we're fearful, so we want to belittle somebody in public, thinking that, I taught them something. No, there was nothing taught there. You just look like an asshole.
It all goes back to intention. All these things go back to intention. So think about this: when there's a lawsuit or a crime against somebody, the judge always looks back at the intent. What was their intention? If it was negative, if it was malice, you're probably going to get found guilty and charged, right? But if your intention wasn't that, they're usually going to let you off or give you a reduced sentence. So think about this: anytime someone pisses you off, you have to look at their intention, and that's where the self-awareness comes in, because we always want to let the emotions take charge and have this knee-jerk reaction to emotional stimulus. But really, if you have self-awareness and self-control, you may feel anger, like you're still going to feel that emotion, but there's that millisecond between what you receive and how you respond. Most people react. Reaction and response is two different things. Reacting is emotional reaction. If you need a good example for everybody, road raging. Somebody pulls in your lane. If you're the first one that's on the horn and you're screaming obscenities at the windshield, that's low self-control, like emotional control. And this is a good practice, because there's so many shithead drivers everywhere. Like, use those opportunities to gain that awareness. Like, that's a great exercise. Like, some asshole pulls in your lane, or, the thing is, like, what is the intention? What are they doing? Are they trying to cut me off, or are they just absent-minded or a shitty driver? And most of the time they're just a shitty driver, or they're distracted. So that, for all you know, you're like raging behind your steering wheel. That person in front of you that got in front of you, they may be looking at a phone, looking at cat memes, singing their favorite song, having the time of their life, not even seeing you. And you're letting their happiness and stupid shit that they're doing, like, affect you on an emotional level, which can ruin somebody's complete day. I had an employee that was working with me for years ago. And like, if he had to sit in traffic, which, hello, we're in Houston, that's a lot of traffic. It would ruin his whole day. It would ruin 8 hours of his day if the traffic was too bad. So, so you have to challenge yourself to go, hey, yeah, that makes me angry, but what was the intention? Like, are they just blind? Are they stupid? Okay, that's who they are. I'm not going to let their stupidity or absent-mindedness control my emotion. So self-control and emotional control are very strong. And it's just something that it's like a muscle. We have to kind of work on it and get better at that. But it's a millisecond from how should I react and how should I respond? Quit trying to react, to just think about what's the proper response.
That's a great point, man. I like that. I never really even thought of it like that either, responding and reacting.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been trying to do better, me personally, with not making decisions, based off of emotion. Because I feel like you never make the right decision then. You know what I mean? I don't care whether it's good or bad. you never make the right decision when it's all based on emotion, or you're in an emotional state, or like immediately after something happens to you or affects you. But I've never thought of it in that spin, man. That's a good nugget.
Yeah, if it's not a fight or flight scenario or a life and death situation, you should have the proper response.
Yeah. Yeah.
No,
So,
I love that.
Tony, I want to hit you with a question here, man.
Mhm.
I want to know, at this point in time in your career, and you may have heard this on here before, Ty. You probably know where I'm going with this. You know, you're a successful person, right? Can probably say that if you really wanted to, you could not have to work anymore, not do business coaching, you know, just kind of chill and enjoy your life.
Mhm.
What motivates you to get up every day and still serve, to still be there for people, you know, continue to at this point in time, obviously it's not money. I mean, you kind of made that point pretty clear. You reached that in your 40s that you were like, I'm tired of sacrificing. What motivates you to not only be there for people, but be there at a high level and still perform at a high level on a daily basis outside of money?
It's all about impact. It's fulfillment and impact. And for me, there's no greater impact than serving other people. Everybody here's got a different way of doing that. And yeah, you can go stack money and make your millions of dollars and do that kind of stuff. But if you're not having a succession plan, if you're not really paying it forward, if you're not helping other people achieve the dreams that you have, then I don't think that you're fully successful. I don't care how much money you have in the bank. So, you know, when I started thinking about this after my accident, which was in 2015, I was actually literally sitting in the back of the ambulance. They're inspecting me, and I'm looking at the wreckage outside the back of the door, and a series of questions started going through my mind. The first question is like, what if I would have died right there? A concrete wall at the drag strip at 120 miles per hour, and the car was completely demolished. There's wheels off the car. I mean, it was a pretty bad wreck, but I had all my safety gear on. But as I was approaching that wall, I thought I was going to die at that moment because of the bad odds. And surviving something like that, and you have these questions, like these life defining questions. And so the first question is like, what if I would have died right there? And then the next logical question becomes, well, had I died, how would I have been remembered? And most of you may think that's some kind of a abstract question, but you come up with an answer pretty quick, because you look at your friends, you look at the people that you work with, or people that have passed away recently in your circle, and you go, well, I was kind of like that guy. How was he remembered? What did people say when he passed away? And man, I had a question answered pretty quick sitting in the back of that ambulance. And it was, I would have been nice, rich guy, cool cars, gone too soon. Because that's the way people were described in my circle. If they passed away too early, it's like, man, he sure was a nice guy. Oh, man, he's very successful. Oh, he had some really cool cars. Man, he's gone too soon. I hope he's upstairs racing with the big man. Like all these kind of things that we see this repeated cycle. Whoever you're hanging around with, hopefully it's not like dirtbag son of a bitch, hope he dies. Like, you don't want to hang around with those people, right? But understand that these are hard questions. And so what's missing when you start to answer that question for yourself? Like if you were to grab a pen after this call, and I would challenge every one of you to do this at some point, grab a pen and a paper, because I want it in your handwriting. So it's very personal, and write your obituary, write your eulogy, right? There's a very powerful exercise we do for understanding where you kind of sit in the world. And I want you to do it from 3 different perspectives. I want you to write the eulogy from what your mom or your dad, even if they passed away, what would they read? If they were at your funeral, what would they read about you? What would they say about you based on today? And if you're married or you're in a significant relationship, how would that person, that's a different eulogy. They're going to see you a different way. How would they write that? If you got children, how would they write that? What would you say on that eulogy that they would read at your funeral? Man, this is powerful. And if you're not shedding some tears and being really honest with yourself when you're going through that exercise, then you're bullshitting yourself about who you are, about how your life is, about the potential that you may or may not have reached at this point in your life. It's a powerful exercise. And that was kind of the thing that was going through my mind in the back of that ambulance. And what was missing was impact. And so you start thinking, well, shit, that's kind of a meaning of life type question. Like, what is impact? And luckily I was in a financial situation where I didn't have to work for 2 more years. And I kind of went on this journey and started thinking about, how am I best going to create impact? And does that mean I'm going to go create a nonprofit? Does this mean I'm going to go do this kind of stuff? Am I going to do that? But it all comes back to, what are the passions and the things that people come back to you and always ask your advice on? Everybody watching and listening to this, there's something that people always come and ask you advice on. Always. It may not be your profession or your career, and that's a good thing, but they're always asking you advice. Maybe it's just guidance or financial things or something's wrong with my car. Can you give me some advice on that? Or maybe it's starting this business. And that was what it was for me, is people were always asking me business advice. How do I scale? How do I become more successful? How do I do this? How do you make better decisions? How do you stay in shape so much? How do you eat properly? All these things that I work on. And I was always just giving this advice out. I was giving it out because I wanted people to get results. And so I started realizing the best way that I am going to impact this world is by teaching people confidence and business principles. Because I realized if I can teach you confidence and business principles, it's not only going to affect you, it's going to affect your kids, their kids, and generations. So I can create a generational legacy of improvement by helping you get over these two things that I'm really good at, that I help people with. So everybody's going to have a different answer on what impact means to them, but that's what motivates me. Is I love to see the before and after, just like you guys are remodeling homes and you get to see the before and after. Man, there's nothing more proud than seeing a finished project or something that's in the works and understand that you had a part of that.
Right
Yeah.
on. Right on.
Great
So
answer.
good. Oh, this episode has been so good. Tony,
Yeah,
I
man.
got two more questions for you before we get off here. We're at an hour and 5 minutes, but what do you recommend as far as resources, any books or good podcasts that you would recommend to, anybody that might be in a leadership position or sales position or whatever, just any good stuff that you've used over the years to help you get where you're at today?
Good question.
Yeah. So yeah, listen to my podcast. If you're watching or listening to this, it's 365 Driven. We're a top 1% show in the world now. So, and we get tens of thousands of downloads a month. And it's based on entrepreneurship. We focus on the 4 core values of health, wealth, mindset, and relationships. And so I've always got different experts coming in and sharing their insights on that. And one of the guys that we interviewed was actually Robert Greene, New York Times bestseller, and he wrote the book 48 Laws of Power. And I always recommend that book. And you were talking about earlier, Ty, about how vulnerability is a key thing and you don't want to come off as perfect. Well, that's actually Law 45. I actually read that a few weeks ago. It's nobody likes poly-perfect. Nobody likes the person that's always bragging about their wins. People can't relate to that. Mm-hmm. People cannot understand, like, if you're just always winning and you're always crushing it and you're always this and you're super perfect, you may think that's a good thing, but you're building envy. You're building, even some of your closest friends or your family, you're building these pools of envy that are really hard to go away. Like, you're going to probably have to get rid of those people before their envy goes away, because you're showing off as perfect in these things. So you need to have signs of vulnerability. You need to show that. I'm not talking about breaking down and crying on Facebook and doing stupid shit like that. I'm talking about just showing that you have imperfections and you're still working on things. And I'm still struggling with things. I mean, Ty, you opened the show telling people that I'm your business coach. Like, that's a vulnerable thing. You'd be surprised how many CEOs of companies don't want to admit they have a business coach. They don't want to admit that they're seeing a psychiatrist or psychologist. They don't want to admit these things because they think that's a sign of weakness. But in reality, that's a show of courage. Real leaders are willing to show, like, hey, I'm not perfect. And if you need examples of that, think about this, like superheroes. Every superhero you can imagine, Marvel, all these different superheroes, they have like the power that everybody sees, but they also have a vulnerability, every one of them. Think about that. There's always this dichotomy of, like, they do this thing really well, but they're struggling with this in their life. And so if you want to build a personal brand, if you want to put your content out there, if you want to be a better leader, you better have some vulnerability that people are aware of, that they know that you're working on, right? So that's a key thing. So 48 Laws of Power, I would highly recommend that book. It's very deep reading. It's one of those phone book looking thick books, but buy it and read it and really go through that, because it'll actually teach you strategies. And here's the good thing about that. When that book came out 25 years ago, it actually got some negative press, right? Because they're like, who's this Robert Greene? And why is he sharing all these influential and manipulative type tactics that people are going to learn? They're going to be able to manipulate all of us. And again, it goes back to what I mentioned earlier, intent. If your intent is pure and you're using that to influence people for positive reasons, that's where you should be focused on. But if you want to be a dirtbag and use it to manipulate people, your intention is negative. You can use this, the same skill, guys. They understand that manipulation and influence are the exact same skills, but it all goes back to what your intentions are. Mm-hmm. So I would highly recommend that book. And the one I mentioned earlier, How to Win Friends and Influence Other People.
I love that. Good stuff, man. So before we get off here, man, Tony, I want to plug whatever it is, whatever events, your upcoming, things that you might have, projects or events, man. What do you have coming up in the near future?
Yeah, we got a live event coming up in October 21st in Steamboat Springs, Colorado. And we do these little short masterminds, usually 2 to 3 days. We bring in some speakers. We limit the attendance to 50 people. And we go hiking. We actually incorporate a lot of physicality like you and Hunter do with the Revolt and different events. Like I like to have the physicality. We do hiking. We've done whitewater rafting. I went to racing school for a day. We do these different things at different events. So we're going to be hiking in Colorado and, just hanging out and all, like everybody that attends my events, a VIP. We have the speakers participate and do all the hiking and events with us. I don't invite speakers that are candy asses that come in and speak and take the next jet out. I don't like those kind of people at my events. So we make sure that they hang out and participate, and we have these nice conversations over meals and do some bonding and build some real network. So if you want information on that, that's at 365driven.com, which is my website.
Awesome. We'll get that in the comments. That's good stuff. Bake, you got anything that you want to ask him or wrap up with?
I definitely want to ask people to subscribe to our YouTube channel at Behind the ToolBelt. And also make sure you guys go over and check his thing out too, man. If you guys have not, if you joined on the back end of this, there's a lot of really good stuff in this episode, man. Tony's a really humble, down-to-earth guy. I heard a lot of great things about leadership, about, just life, personal development. The eulogy thing, I've heard that in numerous places from a lot of really intelligent people. So that's definitely a good exercise to do to, really open up and be real about yourself. And what matters to you. You know what I mean? Nothing's going to tell you more than that. Like you said, Tony, if you're not getting emotional with that, you're lying to yourself, because ain't no one in here has a single thing that they don't want to improve or that they're not ashamed of about themselves. So, definitely check him out. He wrote a book too. So if you guys want to check that out as well, I don't think that we even talked about that in here,
There you go.
but this has been a great episode, man. So if you guys are just joining in at the end, make sure you check this out on the replay. It'll be up on YouTube here shortly, and on Facebook, and check out his podcast, 365 Driven. And if you have not done so, like and subscribe to our YouTube page, Behind the ToolBelt. But that's all I got, man. That's it.
Yeah, that was great. That was great, man. That was a great way to wrap this thing up, man. Tony, is there anything else that you want to comment or plug or anything?
And I'll give some words of encouragement here at the end for that one listener that, they know that they could do better. They know that they have bigger dreams. They're having that self-doubt. They think about, why would anyone listen to me? Why would anybody do this? Like, I'm nothing special. Like all these self-limiting beliefs and these phrases that we kind of carry around, or I'm just a roofer. Like I've had friends that are plumbers. It's like, I'm just a plumber. I'm not to do that. Like all these crap, right? Just push all that shit aside. Realize like today is the oldest you've ever been, but it's also the youngest you ever going to be. And it's never too late.
I like that.
Right. I didn't start this journey until in my mid 40s. Right. And I had friends that laughed about it, and I had potential critics and naysayers and all these things that I feared by not putting myself out there. And the thing is when you start to do things and you start to gain an audience and you start to make a little bit more noise, you will have critics and you will have haters and you will have naysayers. But if that's what's keeping you on the bench, understand that that's just part of the game, guys. Everybody that has changed history in this entire world has had those. Some have even had murderers. We look at Jesus Christ. He was trying to change the world, but guy had murderers, right? So what makes you think that you're going to be the first human in society's history that's going to have everyone love you and everyone like you and everybody's going to support you? It's just not going to happen. So I'll give you a number on that. So about 5% of your audience, even some of your friends and family, are probably going to be those naysayers and critics and haters. But the problem with most people is they focus on that 5% and really try to justify it to those 5% instead of dealing and helping and serving the 95% who are okay with you, or they accept you, or they support you. Like if you could just focus on the 95% of the people that actually somewhat like you and support you, your life's going to be a lot better. So when you get to your deathbed, hopefully it's at a ripe old age. When you look back, you're not going to regret the things that you failed at. You're not going to regret the things you tried and failed. Nobody regrets the things they tried and failed. You're going to regret not doing the things you knew you were capable of. And you're going to look back and go, why wasn't I doing that? Why didn't I start that business? Why didn't I do this? Why didn't I go after that? And you're going to think of, it's because other people. It's always fucking other people. It's always worrying about potential criticism or judgment. But if you may not be happy where you're at right now, take people on that journey. Be vulnerable. Hey, I'm not where I want to be. This is where I want to be. I'm going to take you on this journey. I'm going to document this. And you're going to start to inspire people because they're going to see you putting in the work and improving to become that better version of yourself. And when you look back after a few years, you're going to really understand that this is what I was meant to do. And this is who I was meant to be.
Boom.
Amen. Damn.
Mic drop.
Way to send us off.
Mic
Way
drop.
to send us off, Tony. That was fantastic, man. Thank you for coming on the show, accepting the invite. Thank you, everyone, our loyal watchers, listeners, subscribers. If you haven't yet, I'm going to rebuttal what Chris said. Please subscribe, like, love, comment, whatever. Help us push the algorithms up here a little bit. Tell your brothers, your neighbors, aunts, and uncles about episode 190. This thing was like the cherry on the top, bro. Like this was the bee's knees and the cat's ass of all episodes, bro. Tony, you crushed it, man. Like this shit was lethal, man.
It was good.
Appreciate it,
man.
guys.
It was good.
So thank you so much for coming on. Bake, I'll see you. If I don't see you tomorrow afternoon, I'll see you definitely
You'll see me Friday
morning.
for sure. Yeah, Tony, it was great meeting you, man. That last hour and 20 minutes of my life have been a pleasure.
No
And
doubt.
hopefully see you again, brother. Everyone
All right.
else, we'll see you guys next Wednesday, 7 p.m. for episode 191. Thank you guys for tuning in loyally. We'll catch you guys next week.
See ya.